Okay, we're back. Hey, everybody. Season 3. We made it. We're here. Today I am with Timothy. Hi, Timothy.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Jen?
I'm really good. I'm really, really grateful you were able to come do this. It's really cool. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the other episodes, but in the beginning, I was really handpicking and hand choosing. I was talking to close friends, pillars, people in recovery, being like, can you come help me do this? And then after a while, I started reaching out to people that I've seen in the rooms, but don't have like a super, close-knit relationship with. You're the first person, even though, we know each other. You actually were around quite often in my first home group when I got my start. Even though we don't know each other super often, it was really cool for me to actually have some engagement on the Facebook page and be able to throw out there and say, hey, what do you guys want to see? And then as soon as you offered the option, I'm like, cool, do you want to come on the show and talk about that? And you were like, okay. So I'm really excited to have a real conversation with you. I think this is going to be really good.
Yeah.
So when you read my post, why did you choose the topic of honesty?
Honesty is always one of the first things that comes to mind. It's just based on history and what's happened in the events leading up to some real life change for me personally, and so that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm really excited to kind of dig in and talk about all the different types of areas in which honesty is kind of really important. Maybe we should kind of start with like your journey where you started, where you actually realized how important it was that you were honest with yourself. What was that like for you?
That was it was coupled with denial. Like there wasn't one without the other. It was, I believe, the denial was one of the main drivers and catalysts to finding that honesty. And so when I came to that place, it was basically facing like the reality of actually I did feel like I was gonna die if something didn't give. I felt like it would be that way.
Right.
And so the denial drove me to that, was the driver to the honesty.
Okay.
And that's where it was kind of when I found that.
Yeah, I think for me, fear drove me into honesty. Obviously, our situations are different. I kind of came from a court mandated perspective on that, right? But it's interesting how many different types of ways, different emotions and different things can bring us to that place of honesty. I know for myself, even once I got into the rooms and I started kind of trying to do the process, it was fascinating to me how little I really knew about how dishonest I was about fucking everything, and especially with myself. I have one example. I think I've talked about it before. I used to never be good with money. I borrowed money. I manipulated money. I stole money. I did a bunch of things when it came to money to feed and fuel my addiction. And I remember I was sober and I had been irresponsible with money when I was newly sober. I don't even remember what it was. But I remember my parents asked me about it. And I immediately lied through my teeth to them because I didn't want them to judge me. I didn't want them to be disappointed in me. I didn't want them to think less of me. And so because I had just started this new path and I was like, okay, like my job is to be honest about everything. I didn't even the words fell out of my mouth so quickly with this lie. And then I got in my car and my brain started to process and started to catch up. And they're like, you just lied. Why would you lie about that? The whole point of this is trying to do this entirely honestly. And I got so stressed out by it, I had to pull over. And I started to cry and I had to call my parents. And I said, my job is to try to be different now. So I have to tell you that I just lied to you. And I didn't even mean to. It came out so fast. I'm really sorry. And that was a really cool catalyst for me to be able to see how fast it happens. But the speed at which my defects of character, if I don't want you to judge me, be disappointed in me, not validate me, not like me, the speed at which lies just fell out of my mouth. Like I had no idea until I started trying to be honest. Do you have any experiences with stuff like that?
Yes. You don't know that you're doing it, and just because it becomes such a pattern, and it's just something that you're used to, and it's the defense. Well, so many of the defects come from the based defense of trying to self-protection, or
Yeah,
the
that's
fear,
a really good one.
the fear of that, things that couple together. But yeah, it's you do it because it's like hardwired.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes hardwired by, it's like you pause, pray, proceed, or I don't know how that ties in, but you develop, these people wake up and read certain things day in and day out, and they do that, and they do it, they practice. I think that's why I said pause, pray, proceed. What I meant to say was practice. You put that stuff into practice, and you practice, and perfect practice makes not perfection, but you do the best you can by practicing it.
But definite progression.
Yeah, and trying to combat, like you're dealing with obviously the scales and the tops and bottoms of where people have been is all different for everyone, like personal autonomy, but you are able to, you get yourself out of those hardwire situations by a rewiring, right? Which is what you're gonna do now with what you have.
Which, for me, at least I know with a lot of things that I've learned in going through the book and the programs and the steps and all that, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? I was always told that every time I'm doing something that feels comfortable, it's probably wrong. And every time I'm doing something uncomfortable, that's growth. And that's probably the right direction to go. But yeah, I just remember, with honesty comes sometimes confrontation and hard conversations and boundaries and expectations and really uncomfortable conversations. If you're anyone like, I don't know kind of what your most glaring defects are, but like I'm a people pleaser to the max. And, I've already said it 3 times, like I need you to love me. I need you to tell me I'm doing a good job. I can't possibly disappoint you. So having direct, clear, honest communication for me was almost impossible. Almost impossible. It was so hard for me to be honest because I felt like if I told you what I really thought or what I really needed to say, that you wouldn't like me or you would think I'm a bitch or whatever the case may be. It was such an internal struggle, and that ended up keeping me sick a lot longer than I wanted because I would constantly continue to people please and not learn how to set boundaries or do any of that stuff because I was so concerned about how you would react to it. I remember my sponsor, one time she said, you need to learn how to do this. Like you're never going to get good at it without practice, but you're never going to get good at it if you never even try it once. So I need you to have an honest, uncomfortable conversation. And I'm like, that sounds terrifying. It was to the point where she actually helped me write a letter out. It's been so long now. I can't even remember who it was for, probably a sponsee. I don't know. She had me write it out, and then I had to pray till the cows came home to get the courage to ask this person if I could just read this letter. And the end result, because I had help and guidance from a higher power and my sponsor on how to word it and how to do all these things, the end result was totally fine. And I really realized how much being honest was linked to fear for me, as a lot of things are for us. But holy, like being able to have those hard conversations, like it was impossible. What was that like for you? Was that easy or was it hard?
The conversations were always and like I wouldn't say easy, but they weren't like a super difficult thing.
Not for you.
Due to my upbringing, the capacity in which I was in, I was always emotionally distraught as a young kid, and I still have a lot of emotion, but I'm not unstable, and I'm not especially not emotionally unstable. So I found that like those conversations have come easier to me than they have to other people, perhaps because it's just been the way I've always been. I kind of have been a little bit unfiltered in many ways, just no filter or whatever. Yep. So the exposure of having like to say my trouble, it's been sometimes that I've said too much, and so the conversations can be difficult. It's really a question of going a little deeper on the emotion end, is like past the point of the conversation, is like I don't know sometimes when I'm being affected by a certain emotion, and it just takes like venting it out to be able to, but then it's like, well, if you don't know that you have that, then what is it that you think you're talking about? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, how do I access it? So I think like in not knowing, I think like it would be beneficial to others and to me to be able to just be, if I had a choice between being more honest and less, I would try to be more honest.
Right.
Try to open up more.
I love that.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, maybe we could talk a little bit about to help people who are like you, who sometimes say too much, maybe some ways that you cope and work through that. For me, I've found over my time of practicing direct honesty with others, I found two things incredibly helpful for somebody like me who loves to avoid and doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And how to do it in a loving, tolerant manner. So two things that I have found is, number one, I set expectations beforehand so that I'm already given permission to bring it up later. So an example of that will be, I just sat down with a potential sponsee yesterday. We had lunch and wanted to chat and see if it would be a good fit. And so I looked her right in the face and I was like, here's the thing. This is the way that I sponsor, and I need to know if you're receptive to this. I'm going to love you, not your feelings. I'm going to recommend things based on my experience or pointing in the direction of somebody who has experience based on what I think is going to help you get well with the aid of your higher power. Do I have permission to do that? And then if I'm ever too direct with somebody later on and then they're upset about it, then I can go back and be like, oh, but don't you remember you asked for this, right? And being able to go back is really, really helpful. The other thing that I've found for someone like me who's so uncomfortable having these conversations, I'm quite comfortable now. But the other thing was making it all about me and not about the other person. So here's an example of that. A sponsee has really kind of just blown me off, stalled out, just not ready. I always had serious concerns about being like, you're unwilling, you're not doing the work. Why are you blowing me off? Like, don't you want this? I thought you said you wanted this. Not productive and not a helpful conversation to have with somebody who might be more spiritually sick than somebody who is working the program. So I've learned, this is very helpful, I highly recommend it. My hard conversations talk about how things affect me in a healthy way. So the conversations I have with people, I've had them with several sponsees and the response has been great. I say, can I have permission to have an open conversation with you? Yes, perfect. I'm asking you not to give me an answer right now. I just want to let you know how I feel about this, and I want you to have some time to reflect on that. Is that fair? Cool. I've come to understand that my recovery and my sobriety and my program 100% depends upon my constant working with other people. I need it. It is something that is an absolute priority in my life, and I'm not going to continue to be healthy if I don't have that. Therefore, I need somebody who can commit to doing this stuff. And if that's not you, that's okay. But I need this. So I need to understand if that's something that you want to continue with, or if maybe I should look for someone else because like I have to meet somebody all the time. And of like the 4 or 5 people I've had those conversations with, 4 people took a week, came back and said, let's do this. And got right back on the horse, which I think is great. But it's amazing how many different skill sets I've had to learn how to build because I'm just so afraid of being honest with people. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting. That's like finding the filter between, like, you need to, of course, like you said that one of the first things you said was about the feelings. It's like I can't just be, more or less paraphrasing, like I can't just be concerned about what I'm going to do to your feelings, as opposed to like if I'm trying to give you the straight goods, right? And
right.
Like it's up to everyone to gauge how they do that, and it's going to be different for everyone. But I know for me, being a people pleaser, I am often. Actually had a friend of mine tell me that it looks sometimes that I'm afraid to say the wrong thing Like that's just like his observation of looking at me. It's like he said like sometimes I feel like when I'm around you, it's like you're walking on eggshells, or you're like waiting for like the wrong thing to be said and like something's gonna blow up or something,
Okay.
something to that effect. Which was, I didn't take offense to it. It's because it's him, and it's like that person in my life, and that guy is a solid guy in my life. So I took that at face value and kind of, yeah. I don't easily get offended much these days. It would have to be a lot to like really offend me, but I did have to kind of look at that based on the fact that it was a friend. Kind of go like, oh yeah, there obviously is this really good reason that he said that to me, you know. But yeah, just that fear of saying the wrong thing. But yeah, like yeah, that's it's a loaded topic. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what about honesty and like different? So we've kind of talked a little bit about being honest with other people and kind of learning how to get honest with yourself about what you need kind of coming into recovery. How has the principle of honesty really changed and affected you in your later years?
It's been paramount that I'm honest about everything, and that there aren't. It's not about just taking those big scale pieces of things that require like a lot of digging and a lot of like. If there's something I want to reveal to somebody, I need to realize that it needs to sometimes be from an outside facet. And it needs to be like a priest or someone up that alley. I'm not saying that I'm afraid of like revealing things that are in certain areas, but what I am saying is like I need to be careful, and there's certain people that are more fit for doing that work than other individual group based individuals,
Right.
or excuse me, or people that are in places that we would be on a group level. I guess
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that takes it to a place that I didn't even think about, right? Like the 4 or 5 of it all. Interesting. Yeah, let's totally go there. 4 and 5. I remember I was so blocked. Like I didn't think anything was my fault. But I didn't have any issues being honest for myself because I had too much fear. If I don't get this right, if I don't do this thing properly, then I'm going to get in a lot of trouble, and I didn't want to do that. But it's interesting being able to work with other people, and like there's a lot of fear for a lot of people around how honest they can be about their lives. And I think that what you said is really important, right? I always give people that I work with an open space, and I tell them like what you tell me is 100% confidential, but if you don't feel that you can be 100% honest, there are other avenues that you can take to get that kind of protection if that's what you need, which I think is great. I heard a really great thing in a meeting a year or 2 ago. I just loved it, and I use it all the time now. Somebody was sharing about real deep honesty doing the 5 process, and said, for anyone who hasn't done a 5 before, please be aware that there's absolutely nothing you could say that could surprise us. Like we've once you've done 5 or 6 of them, you've heard it all. And what I loved what he said, I don't care. And I'm paraphrasing, just grabbing some things out of the top of my head, but he would be like, I don't care that you robbed a bank. I want to know why. I don't care that you jacked that old lady on the street. I want to know why. I don't care that you ran away. I want to know why, which I thought was really, really cool. But I do think that it's really important that we as sponsors and pillars and guides trying to help these people into a better life, let them know that it's okay to be honest if you're picking the right person. But if you feel that you can't be, this thing doesn't work unless you are. So let's find somebody that you can be honest with. Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm trying to think of different areas of honesty. I'm not thinking of anything, so if you don't think of anything, then I'm going to turn the conversation a little bit, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Just honesty of that you might not know what it is you need sometimes, right? And just being honest about it, and just like being able to know who to back to like a kind of reverting just very quickly back to like the other part of it that we were just talking about is like just some prudence with who and what you're sharing your information to and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like having a value or placing a value on somebody, be like, I gave this information to Jen, and I trust that if and when I'm going to give this information to Jen in a conversation, that she would do good with it rather than not.
Mm-hmm.
Use it for experience, and don't do a name drop and talk to someone and she might be talking to someone else, a sponsee, somebody where they're going through something, and you can be like, you know what? I've heard of this situation. If I haven't been through it, I know somebody that has, like being from our conversation.
Totally.
Right. So yeah.
You know, I love that. And I love that this just popped up in my head because of it. And I think that it's really important. You know, I do this podcast and I talk a big game about the big book and all the stuff that the 12 steps can give you, because it can, and it works, and it completely transformed my life. But I think it's really important that we talk about both sides, because there's always going to be, with black, there's always going to be white. With right, there's always going to be wrong. Yin and yang, they go together, positive and negative. It's just the way that it goes. And I think that it's really important that people in recovery understand that in a room full of people in recovery, a lot of them are still sick. A lot of them are struggling, right? Like you have some really solid people, hopefully, attending your group or your meeting all the time. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen this and I've witnessed this over the last 4 3/4, I guess. I'm coming up on 5 already. Oh my God. I've just, and this hasn't been an issue for me, and I'll explain why after, but the amount of time you see gossip and drama and people becoming best friends because they're both in recovery, and people having issues with 13th stepping, which if anyone is not an addict or an alcoholic doesn't know about this, it's about dating and going after people when you're not even 12-stepped, or when you're 12-stepped and they're not. It's a whole thing. But there's just, I don't think there's enough global understanding from people, not even on the outside, but for people in recovery. I can't tell you how often I've had a sponsee be like, I can't believe this person did this to me. I can't believe they said this about me behind my back. They're supposed to be in recovery. And I'm like, well, hold on. Hold on. I need you to understand that everybody struggles. Everybody has their own defects. Everybody has their own list of things that they've gone through in their lives, which mold these reactions, these superhighway responses in our brains. Yes, you want to be totally honest, but you have to be very careful who the circle that you choose of people that you give your private information to. Not even just in a very private, confidential step 5 setting, but the people that you surround yourself with, right? It's been known. I've seen tons of stuff on the internet for years. Like, you will make within 5 or 10% of your 5 closest friends with income, right? You will become just like the people that you surround yourself with. And this was information that was given to me back when I was still doing marketing stuff. So I had kind of the basic knowledge of it. So coming into recovery, paired with the fear of going to jail and screwing everything up, I had this big brick wall. Like, I did not let anybody into my circle in my first year. I surrounded myself with service work because, it was also, sorry to say it out loud, I loved everything about the beginning of the pandemic because it was the beginning of my recovery. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to do anything. All I could do was go to meetings. And I loved it. I loved that small portion. I think that happened exactly as God knew it needed it to for me to kind of get that. But outside, I didn't do anything. I was going to 4 meetings a day and I was staying with my parents. And that's like all I did. And people would invite me out to things and want to go do things. And I had no desire because I didn't trust anybody. I didn't trust anybody. And it took me a really long time to figure out, if you really listen to someone's share, if you really listen to what people talk about, it doesn't take very long to be able to see who talks the talk and who walks the walk, who does everything right inside the rooms and who does everything right outside of the rooms. And so for me, I've never had a problem with being able to find people that have what I want. And I've always really gravitated towards people that, and I don't mean better than me, but people that are better than me, people that are more wise, that are more humble, that have more experience, people that are going the direction that I'm going. Those are the people that I gravitate to. And I have to level up sometimes. And sometimes that means letting some people kind of go by the wayside. But I'm constantly looking at growing, and I'm constantly looking at surrounding myself with people that grow. I've never really had an issue with some of the spiritually sick things that come with putting a bunch of sick people in a room together. But I've heard a lot. I have had a sponsee. I won't go into details because it's not something that I want to promote. Have a lot of negative words towards me. Blamed me for her suffering, which is unfortunate. Not my fault. But then I got kind of dragged through the mud online about it. And it didn't feel good. But at the same time, I wasn't worried because I knew that anybody who knows me knows that's not true, right? But I think that that's something that people in recovery really need to be aware of, is be honest, but be careful of who's in your circle. Because if you're going to be honest about what you're going through and you can't trust the person that you're giving that information to because they're struggling too, right? I've seen a lot of people go back out because they think people in the rooms can't be trusted. It's just because you're talking to the wrong people. Have you seen any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. It's tough. People are people, and you want to keep a distance from the toxic behavior, but people are people, and people fly off the handle, and people do things. And so it's like, I don't have to be around this person to be advocating for be an advocate of their behavior, but also don't have to be like, I don't have to cut them out of my lives, out of my life, right? Like I draw a boundary. I've been through a lot with that individual sense of like, I've had at least one roommate that, he talks a good talk, but the talk is always very good without alignment. Talk can be whatever it is, whatever you want it to be. Like I was a liar. I was a liar in the way that I used to live. Like, and I would tell every story. So it had nothing to do with what reality of what I did every day. And wasn't truly aligning with any of the things that I said. So lining that up with what I just said about, another person is like, I've seen how that person lives, and how that person lives is not the way that they talk, right? It's not, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say to my best of my ability, without stretching, that I walk the walk, and I do the best that I can, and I bear in mind that I am going to be mistakes, and I'm guilty of comparison, and I'm guilty of jealousy. I'm guilty of a lot of things. I've saw some things recently where I've sat down with a guy that is well known and around, and we know him and stuff, and for years I had this I had the God complex thing in regards to that specific person.
Yep, I totally know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, I looked at them, and they have a bunch of stuff going on. They're, they're successful. They're doing this, they're doing that, and they're doing all the right things, and they work with people and all that kind of stuff, right? And I respect this person and I love this person, but that doesn't it's separate from what is inside of me in regards to them. So my ego in regards to that person has been so huge, and generally speaking, a large ego person, very much so. And I had a lot of egotistical issues for sure, and still working on it. But like, it's like I was like enthralled. Is that the right word? I don't know. Like, I was deeply moved by the revelation of, after I sat down with this guy in a room, that I was like, wow, like you really are starting to learn that you need to get over yourself in regards to this person. And I think it was like around the time that I was like, sending him a message being like, hey, we need to sit and have a coffee. And that was kind of contingent on like having a conversation with him in regards to maybe having a lead for me getting some employment, because I've been unemployed for a bit, but which is not a normal thing for me. But yeah, it was cool to see in the best way. In the worst way, it was the best discovery, kind of, because it was like I saw that I'd been doing this and I had this like backlog of this person, and my ego would tell me not to go to things that he was affiliated with, and like things that he had himself out there for, based on the fact that I thought that I was better than him.
Okay.
And like, that's completely, and I'm okay with saying that, because that's just like how warped my mind is, right? But it's an amazing thing, because you can love that person. You really can, because I love that guy. Like, you can genuinely love the person, but the love in the heart is it's not the thoughts and the ego. The ego has worked its way in so much, right, that you could love them with your whole self, and it doesn't matter, because you've been thrown way off the track by letting your head rule. And right. That's I was just so grateful to have that experience of like, I've known this guy for years, and I actually, I might go to a book study one of these days where where he's doing it.
Yeah.
And what if, in a way, what a fucked up revelation that a statement say like, oh yeah, like I'll finally go to a big book study, but it's on the basis of the fact that if I didn't make this discovery in myself, I never would have.
Right. It's amazing how twisted things with our ego end up holding us back in these bizarre ways. I feel you. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that sparked something else inside me when it comes to honesty that I think might be helpful for people, at least people like me who have the defects that I have. My God. My ego needs, again, I've said it like 12 times today, like I need everyone to know how good of a job I'm doing. I need your validation. So when I was 12-stepped, my second year, I truly believe, I've said this on other episodes, I truly believe to my core, the only reason I made it to the end of year 2 is because I was sponsoring, not because I was working an active program. Not that I wasn't trying to, right? But you know so little about each step after you've done it one time. You're not actually applying a lot of this stuff. I really think that if I wasn't sponsoring, I wouldn't have made it. But I immediately got well, and I did all this work. And for the first time, I wasn't obsessing about using drugs or alcohol. And I really felt good. And I did exactly what the book warns against, because we all do it, right? I did all this work and I went, I can relax now. And then I walked away and rested on my laurels, didn't apply all these things. And then things got hard again. I remember 2 different instances, one with my sponsor more so, and one with a girl in the rooms. But I was so terrified to tell my sponsor that I was struggling, because I didn't want her to be disappointed in me. I didn't want her to say, well, I can't sponsor you anymore because you're not doing the work, right? Like, there was just so many, the crazy things that we build up in our brains over nothing. It's bananas. But I vividly remember at least 2 or 3 times where I wouldn't call my sponsor for months, because my brain was like, I can't tell her I'm struggling, because then that means I'm not doing a good job. Therefore, I'm going to make myself better, and then I'll go to her and report good things, which obviously made it far worse, right? Because then not only are you not getting advice, but now you're totally ignoring God, and now you're just self-willing the shit out of everything. And 3 or 4 times in 2 to 3 years, I had to call her and be like, can we meet up and have a conversation? And I don't remember the others, but I remember the first. And I remember getting in her car. She looked at me, she gave me a hug, and she said, so how are you? And I said, I'm good. She said, what's going on? And I told her just a bunch of surface level bullshit. And then I said, how are you? And then she responded briefly. And then she looked at me and she just gave me these loving eyes. And she said, but how are you really? And I like just thinking about it makes me emotional because I just started to cry. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm struggling so bad and I don't even know what to do. She's like, there it is. Perfect. Let's get to work. Let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what we're supposed to do. She was like, get it out. Like, this is good. I've been waiting for this to happen for you. Yeah. And so getting over the ego, getting over the defects, being able to ask God for help against these things, I was so worried about how I would be viewed that I was depriving myself of leveling up my recovery. And that was something that I struggled with for a really long time. I remember shortly before I had my next big life change, I was very depressed. And I couldn't figure out why. I was unwilling to reach out about it. But I remember kind of jumping into self-pity and that victim mentality being like, I'm doing everything right. Why am I so fucking miserable? And I've since learned that if you're actually doing everything right, you are not miserable. So when these things come up, it's because there's something that you need to work on. I had another instance recently where I went into like a little three-week bubble of just self-pity and stuff. And then I realized it was all fear and resentment, right? I can catch these things now because I've really been working on them. But I was so depressed and I was so unwilling to do any work around it. And over the past couple of months, I had been 12-step doing all these things. I would go into our home group, my first home group. That's where we met. Mm-hmm. And I would go and the topics would get picked on the board. Sometimes if there was something I just learned or I thought I was good at talking about it, I would throw that topic out there because I'm like, let's talk about something I'm good at talking about. Mm. And I was topics would go up and I would sit in my brain, not listen to what anybody else was saying, not trying to learn actually anything, and trying to put myself in a position of screaming from the mountaintops what you can do to make this work for you. Because I felt that I had this responsibility to show people in the room that the program works. Because it does. But so much dishonesty in 3 months of sharing. Oh yeah, just do this, and this is what I was taught, and this is from the book, and this is how you do it, and if you do this, life is great. Meanwhile, I'm dying on the inside. I'm miserable, but too afraid to be honest with people about that. So I'm at work. I am massively depressed. This is probably right in the middle of 18 months to 2 years sober, to the point where I didn't even know what to do anymore. And I was so miserable. I don't even have time to do this, but it was so bad. I went to the nooner. I had to take a lunch break and I had to go. And I sat down and God knew, like I was one of the first people to speak. God knew I needed to share and I just bawled. Mm-hmm. And I was totally honest with this room full of people, half people I know and trust and half the people I don't know. And I just started to cry and I'm like, I'm miserable and I don't know why. And like, I'm terrified to tell you that I'm struggling because A, I don't want you to judge me, but B, look at all these new people. I don't want new people to think that this doesn't work because it does. And like, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I haven't thought about picking up. And I think that that's a really fucking big win, but I'm fucking miserable and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I just let it all out. And I think like half the meeting was like people coming over and hugging me. Like, but it was this crazy release that I didn't know that I really needed. The point of the story is that this girl came up to me and it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. And I will never forget the moment this person looked at me and asked me for some of their time. And I said, yeah, what's going on? And she said, I need you to understand how much I needed to hear that but not just hear it from you. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, I'll never forget it. Exact words were, I was starting to think this program wasn't for me because I come in here and I sit down and I listen to people like you who have what I want talk about how amazing sobriety is, how amazing these steps are, how amazing life gets, all the good stuff. And I'm struggling. And I was thinking that this program wasn't for me, that I wasn't doing it right, or maybe it just would never work for me. You coming in and telling me that the last couple months has been a cover up and that you're miserable, but you're still doing the deal helps me to understand that maybe this program is for me and I'm actually not alone. And that was the first time that I understood how important honesty and being vulnerable and being honest in a room meeting setting was. I had no idea. I thought I was doing the right thing by talking all the good game about the steps and not talking about the struggles. And that was a huge monumental turn for me. And now it's funny, my current sponsor, he's like, he knows when he's at a meeting that I'm at and I get on stage, he says that he can look in my eyes before I even open my mouth and he'll know if it's going to be a vulnerable cry share or if it's going to be a super motivational share. Because I'm not afraid of that today, right? I need people to know that there's going to be ups and downs because that's what real recovery looks like. But if you're doing the deal, the obsession doesn't come back. That was just one of the biggest lessons in my life of being honest with strangers too, right? Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. That's very good.
Here I was thinking I was doing something wrong. And that was definitely something right. It was cool.
Because we don't want to look at like that, how like something that looks pretty messy can be like, we think it's like self-sabotage is like automatically that's just a bad thing according to self-sabotage, right? But in reality, it's like, it's very healing.
Well, and I just don't understand why. And like, I don't know if this is true of all people with addiction, but it's definitely like I don't understand why for so long I struggled with the idea that if I wasn't killing it all the time that I wasn't doing it. Like I don't know why I thought that struggling and going through down dips were like I don't even know how to say it. I wish I knew that it's good. That it's good. Going back to that, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? You spend all this time working your butt off with your sponsor, gaining all these new skills, getting all these spiritual principles, bringing God into your life, building character, making amends, doing this whole thing. You spend so much time getting really well. And then you immediately think that because you went through several months of interior work that suddenly you're like the perfect example of a human being. And that's just not the case. Like it takes lots of practice. And it took me a really long time to get to a point where when things happen that aren't so good, I used to just kind of do the norm, right? Just jump right back into self. Why is this happening to me? Why is this not happening for me? What's going on? Like just like the victim mentality of it all. Now, instead of saying, why is this happening to me? I say, what am I supposed to learn from this? Right? Everything hard, I'm grateful for because I'm like, oh my God, this is God leveling me up. This is God teaching me something new. This is God pushing me to uncomfortability because I'm supposed to get better.
Yes.
And I actually have put myself in a position, it's not always easy, but most of the time now I'm just like, oh, this sucks. Oh, this is good. Okay. How am I going to deal with this? And this situation that I had a few weeks ago, again, hilarious, lack of honesty. It wasn't that I was being dishonest. Well, I mean, sorry, totally being dishonest, but my brain said to myself, it's not that I'm being dishonest. I was just choosing not to say something. But that's still 100% being, if you think something and are unwilling to say it, then that's just being dishonest. But I had some issues. Not going to go into kind of what they were, but I had some issues and some problems and some fear and just all the stuff that we have. And I was unwilling to confide in this person about it. And I started to build resentment and I started to build fear and I started to build all these things. And what's crazy if you're in recovery is most of us will live in this state for weeks, months, or years before we're even aware of it. Because these are like our deepest rooted things we've acted in for so long, we don't even know we're doing it. So I acted in this for about 3 weeks. 5 years ago, it would have been 3 months before I recognized it. But then suddenly I like woke up and I'm like, what's happening right now? And I actually like sat down and reflected the chain of events that had taken place. And I'm like, holy shit, I am resentful. I am being a victim. I am totally pitying my, like, holy, what's going on? And then I had to backtrack and be like, what caused all this? And it was something that I didn't even think would. But it did. But it took me 3 weeks to figure out that I needed to do a step 10 on it. So those 3 weeks were really uncomfortable. But as soon as I actually was aware of the uncomfortability, I'm like, okay, I need to learn something. What are we doing? And I was like, immediately, Kate, let's analyze. Let's bring in some other 12-step people and get to work. But it's just, it's crazy how important honesty is in like so many different areas.
Yeah.
What a great topic.
It's loaded.
Yeah.
It's a loaded topic.
Yeah. I think I'm almost fresh out of honesty stuff. Anything else coming to mind for you?
It's always just that it's always good to have a conversation. Always good to just connect on that basic level, whether it's like just with an individual or not. Like I have lots of people in my life that are not in the deal that you and I are in, right? And that's fine. But it's always important to have those conversations. So the person, whether you think you're going through something or you know that you are or not sure, it's what's coming up for me recently has been family, like in regards to like just, you know, it can be people, they happen to be people of faith, like certain aspects of my family, like where we live and stuff, but just how important it is just to the one-to-one on any basis is always very important, because one of the things that I learned on this journey in the early going was like the greatest thing that I have is the greatest independence comes from the dependence upon God. And so
Love that.
So that was a really big thing, is like I didn't need the validation from people. I learned that that's not something that I have to live with anymore, and I began living that way. But then there's also that, how do you separate that or draw the line between the dependence upon God and the free walk as a solo person versus the ability to share with the others, and like your family is there for you if and when you need them. Of course you need them, so when you need them, to have those conversations. And if it weren't for like getting to the point with that honesty of that I've been so much in denial for too long, then you'd never get to a point where you feel like you have to, because you have it all figured out. And then I'm out there and I'm looking for validation through people because I'm so weak and I need that validation. And so without that, getting to a place where I'd lost it, and I've put God help me, like God put me back together, then I would, I don't know, I went off on a tangent on that, but it's just like, it's just so powerful. Like the one-to-one, it starts with the one-to-one, man. And like that's where the journey kind of began for me. This last time, like, it was April 2018, and I ran in, and I had been coming out of in the room since like the winter this month, September 2013. And then it just going through that cycle until, you know, the spring of 2018. And that transformation began with this one-to-one and somebody working on their 12, you know, and doing it thoroughly. And it's just the best thing because, and so, I guess I was trying to like put in italics, the highlight the one-to-one is very important. And so it's good to be honest with me and stuff, but sometimes it just takes bouncing off another person, you know.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that we have been given this solution and this way of life. And no matter how hard some of the days get, like it's so interesting to me now. And I remember being freshly sober and hearing people say this, and I'm like, I was resentful. I was like, get out of here. That's never going to happen to me. the problems that I have today are nothing like the problems that I had in my last 2 years of active addiction. The biggest problem that I had yesterday was Interact e-transfer not functioning properly and thinking that my landlord was not going to receive my rent. So my biggest thought that I had yesterday was, am I going to have to pay double rent? Right? Having the money to do that wasn't even an issue for me. But like, those are the problems that I have today, right? Trying to figure out if I, like, it's crazy. It's the suicidal, the hopeless, the broken, the addicted, the struggle of living that lifestyle and being given this solution that Creator provide. Like, it's just, I'm extremely lucky. We are extremely lucky that we are exactly where we are today. And I remember never to take that for granted. Yeah. If you could say anything to somebody who could be watching or listening to this that is struggling, what would you say to them?
I would say we collectively are as willing to listen as the dying can be. And that's really something that just struck me like just before you were talking. And that's really what it, and that's from my own experience, right? I don't have to say like this is where you can find it in the book. It's there, but this is what I found in my own life. And that's, so if you're, if somebody is struggling out there, which there is many, then yeah, is willing to listen as the dying can be. Just think of the statement, because it's like, that takes so much pain. And if you're in that kind of pain, man, like I would be, God knows I wasn't rejoicing at that very moment when I was, at that crossroads where I was about to get on the path to real recovery. But like, if I'm looking at that standpoint of what I used to be, I would say to my past self, like I ought to be rejoicing at that point that I'm as willing to listen as the dying can be, because there was something inside of me that said, and somebody I know says like it's a flame of dignity, or it's a spark, a flame to live, or however you want to put it. But like, there was something inside of me when it actually, because the facade and the ego behind like, oh, I want to take my own life or something, right? These kind of thoughts. I'm just going to go off on a branch here very quickly. But it's like a friend of mine brought to my attention, like, yeah, that guy says he wants to kill himself, but then you see what happens when his smack dealer goes by, and then he picks up his smack. He takes his smack and suddenly he doesn't want to. So the difference between a jumping off point and being like, yeah, you can't see life sober, you can't see life drunk, you can't see life high, then what needs to happen here? And the reality is that I told myself while it was still working, I'm teetering on that little bit that's left where I still can actively use it, and it's still working to some degree. Never to the degree that it was before in the beginning, because the beginning was heaven. Like you might as well put it that way. It's a little extreme, but it's like now I'm literally as willing to listen as the dying can be, and I'm at the point that I literally feel like I am going to die if something doesn't shift, and quickly. Whereas before, that feeling is not really real, because that's just the feeling that you get before you take that in. And being at the point that I was at, as willing to listen as the dying can be, that is past the point of no return, past the point of there is no more picking up booze for Tim. There's no more RSA, cans of half liters of RSA in the woods and doing powder and whatever. It's past that point. The effect is worn off. It's literally like hitting that road of the ego says before the point of no return that this would be a good option for me to just jump off a bridge. But that facade becomes reality when it's like there is only one choice. And it's like, I try to off myself, or I get on this road and go the other direction. And like, that's really long and extended, but it's like, That's the only way I can draw it out. And as willing to listen as the dying can be, like literally that sense that I'll wrap it up with just saying like that inner peace, that inner spark, that fundamental ideal on the inside, right? Is like, I don't know what the purpose is, but I know that like when I was faced with death, I really didn't want to die. Like literally, like it's good to just spout off because it sounds really good. And like, oh, if I don't get a hit or if I don't get, you know, I don't get my pint, then I'm really not going to make it, you know, bullshit. Or like whatever that kind of, that garbage talk is. It's like, no, when you face that reality of like that your life is going to be taken from you, there was a guiding force on the inside. And I always had, not everybody has the benefit of being raised in such a way where they had some exposure to something else up there or out there, you know. I did. I was raised not directly in it, but I was raised around it, and I had people in my family that had that in their lives. And so I was very fortunate to like, I don't know what, I felt no purpose. Like, but I knew that there just, when it came down to it, that dying wasn't an option. Like there had to be something else. And I'm like, right. How is it that I've been this way, you know? But I'm so grateful in hindsight because everything that I lived through got me to that.
Right.
So, yeah.
I love that. That reminds me of how I describe my addiction and what drugs and alcohol did for me when I tell my story. Not the first time I drank. The first time I definitely drank like an alcoholic and I swore I'd never drink again. The second time that I drank because of peer pressure and my defects and wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
It was like I was holding my breath my entire life. And then as soon as I drank, it was like I could breathe for the first time, right? All the defects, all that I need you to like me, all of that stuff, it all just kind of disappeared and it went away. And I was confident and I was, you know, my wit came out and I was funny and everything was really good. And that was the way that it was for a really long time. And that moved over into blow and that moved over into meth and a lot of other things. And I remember always having that feeling, it's like I couldn't breathe until I got high and then I could finally breathe again. The last year of my addiction, when it was really, really bad, I'd stay up for about 5 days at a time. And when I would fall asleep, I'd crash from anywhere from 12 to like 48 hours. It was crazy. And when I opened my eyes and I was finally sober, I was so suicidal. I just thought the world would be better off without me. I wanted to want a better life, but knew I didn't deserve it. I wanted to want to be sober, but knew I could never do it because the only thing that made me not want to kill myself was getting out of bed, pouring a 5-shot drink, having a hoot, and then I could breathe again. And the last year and a half, it took in a lot of substances and I never felt high. I never felt drunk. I felt sober. I felt normal. So what I like to give to anyone listening or watching is that if you give this thing everything you have, man, oh man, I breathe deeply every single day. I've never felt more like myself. I can't wait to see how much more like myself I feel 5 years from now. The relationships I've built, the healing I've done, the people I've healed by making amends, the character I've built. My dad actually just sent me a really nice text this morning. And I told him he made me blush. But in fact, he made me cry. I wish I had my phone in front of me, but I did a personal best at work. And he sent me a message being like, Mom told me that you did this. And I just want you to know how proud I am of you and everything that you've become. And
yeah.
It's one of the greatest gifts of my entire life is being able to be actively the daughter that I know they deserve.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to be somebody who's able to give that love back to them. It's just such a really beautiful thing. And I'm just extremely, extremely grateful that I'm here. But for anyone who's struggling, please understand that just like you said, Tim, today I see that I needed every single thing that I went through. I needed every single bottom. Every time that something got worse and worse and worse, I needed every single thing that happened to me because all of those events led me here. And now there's not a single thing that I'm not willing to be honest about my past, because I know that being honest about my past will give somebody the ability to finally get honest about theirs. And that while this show is extremely angled towards people in the rooms, because that's where I found my path, the words and the spiritual principles don't have to be grounded in that. If that's not for you, that's okay. There's lots of other avenues. I don't sit here and pretend to know everything. If 12 steps is not for you, maybe some of the principles could be. But if you're struggling, reach out, because life gets really fucking good when you fucking do this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. I cried more than once. I'm good. Are you good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
doing
much
this.
for having me.
Amazing.
Okay.
What are we going to talk about next time I see you?
Could talk about
I don't know yet.
yeah.
Ah!
That's it.
But seriously though,
Yeah.
throw a topic out. Maybe we'll do it again.
Okay.
Yeah?
Sounds good. Now? Or-
Yeah. Just throw something off the top of your head.
Relationships.
Ooh, love it. I'm here for it. Cool.
Cool.
Until next time.
Okay.
Peace.